Welcome, everyone. My name is John Paul Jones. I'm the Dean of the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. It's great to see a big crowd here tonight for the last of our Soundscape lectures. I'd like to give another round of applause to our prelude player, Grace Shepard, from Tucson Medical Center's Healing Arts program. Tonight's really special because the lecture tonight is given also by the person who gave the very first Downtown Lecture Series 6 years ago on happiness to a crowd probably about as big as this one or maybe a little bigger. And his name is Celestino Fernandez. And he's going to talk about the development and the cultural and regional influences of border music in three styles: the norteño tradition, the corridos, and mariachi. And it's a great lecture for those people who tell you that, like art, they don't know much about border music, but they like what they hear, or they know it when they hear it. Following Celestino's talk, we will have a mariachi band come on stage, and they will do a short set, 3 songs. And this is Tucson's very own Mariachi Sonido de Mexico. And they've been around for 20 years. They're led by the director, Andrea Gallegos. And they are a band that plays all over Mexico and the US Southwest. And they have been instrumental in keeping the mariachi tradition alive here in Tucson by training so many young people in the tradition and also instilling in them the pride of that part of Mexican culture. I know you'll really enjoy it. As usual, I have a few people to thank before we begin by my introduction of Celestino. But I wanted to invite tonight's, in fact, the series title sponsor, Mike Kasser, to join me on stage to say a few words. Mike, thank you very much for your support. I should just say, Mike is a hiking buddy of mine. He's an amazing person, born in Hungary, very interesting history getting out of Eastern Europe during the war era. Lived all over the world, speaks 7 languages with his wife, Beth, is an avid traveler. He's a venture capitalist, he's a developer, he's a PhD from the University of Grenoble and with 2 degrees from MIT.
Enough.
Where, he rubbed elbows with another famous person in Tucson. And he's a great friend, and I really appreciate his and Beth's support through the Haloalua companies of our series. And it's particularly apt that he would support this particular series because he and Beth are tremendous philanthropists around the arts, including not only this series, but long-term supporters and big supporters of the Tucson Museum of Art and also the Arizona Theater Company. Thank you, Mike.
I'm just going to say a couple of things. First of all, let's see. I'm so happy to see what's happening downtown. I mean, aren't we all? I mean, this is like crazy. When I got here 25 years ago, oh my God, downtown shut down at 5 o'clock and that was it. So it's great, and let's keep it up. And so that's number one. Number two, I'm so glad to support the university and the great things that JP and his crew do. And Joaquin Ruiz, who's College of Science, he's in the audience too. I wanted to give him And, you know, this is a great city. We love it here. We're so glad we came here. We're lucky to fall into Tucson. We came from Hawaii. My company's name is Holualoa. I started in Hawaii. And I wanted to move to Arizona. Maybe I shouldn't tell these long, okay. And I wanted to move to Arizona, and I wanted to go to Phoenix because business was better in Phoenix. My wife said, I am not going to Phoenix, but I'll come to Tucson. So that's why we're here. Anyway, I just wanted to say it's a pleasure to sponsor this event and the series of events. And back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Among the other sponsors of this series, my good friends Ken and Linda Robin, and Doctors Vivi and Adib Sabah, and good. Thank you both, Joanne Ellison and Barbara Starrett, and media partners, Arizona Daily Star, and the great folks, really fabulous, funny, happy people from AZPM back here. And it doesn't take them but a day to put everything up so that anyone can watch. And there are lots of people, including Beth Kasser, who are watching live streaming right now because of the great people at AZPM. We couldn't do that on our own. And our downtown partners, Tucson Jazz Festival, and they will be filling this auditorium for a good part of January with an excellent set of musicians. So please support the Tucson Jazz Festival. The oldest and the newest hotels in Tucson, in downtown Tucson, the Hotel Congress and the AC Hotel by Marriott, and thank them for their support, and also Park Tucson, Downtown Tucson Partnership, and I guess tonight most of all, the crown jewel of Tucson, the Fox Tucson Theater. Thank you, Craig Sundberg, for all your support. Okay, you're in for a treat. Sel is a great speaker and a great person. When we decided to do music, you know, he was the first on the list. He is Distinguished Outreach Professor Emeritus of Sociology in the School of Sociology in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences in the University of Arizona. And prior to becoming a Distinguished Outreach Professor, he went through the ranks of Assistant, Associate, and Full Professor in Sociology. And he also served at a time as the Vice President for Academic Outreach and International Affairs. He came here with a PhD from Stanford University, and he spent 42 years at the university before he retired. And he still teaches for us. He teaches a great class to hundreds of students every year called Pursuit of Happiness, based in part on his work and the lecture that he provided. The mariachis are warming up. Sel's research is in Mexican immigration and education and popular culture, and he has a stellar record of research, but his outreach distinguished title comes from all the work that he has done in the community. And so much work, in fact, that he's had a school named after him. He is associated for 30 years with Tucson's International Mariachi Conference, for 20 years plus with Tucson's Norteño Festival, with a corrido contest that is run through Arizona high schools, and Tucson Meet Yourself, again, another 20 years. He's written 50 corridos himself, including the seductive La Mujer Misteriosa and the ominous Peligro en el Desierto. He's had 5 corridos written about him. You're really going to enjoy tonight. He took a good bit of time off in the fall to work on this presentation. Coming out of retirement, postponing a little bit of his practicing for his 23rd marathon. He's a great guy, and I ask all of you to join me in welcoming Celestino Fernandez to the stage.
Good evening. The difference between norteño and mariachi. That's the end of my talk. That didn't take 45 minutes. I better say a few more things. Okay, Juan Gabriel Julián Álvarez. Juan Gabriel, composer of over 1,500 songs, including the one we just heard, The Border. Juan Gabriel knew the border. He grew up in Ciudad Juárez, across the line from El Paso, Texas. And although the people on the border may be nice, as he said in the song, the current situation for migrants, especially kids, is anything but nice. Speaking of the border, where is the border? Well, there are at least 3 borders. There's a geographical border. The Sonoran Desert extends well into Sonora and into Arizona. There's a political border, governed by laws and policies, the wall. And there's a cultural border. A cultural border has no limits, because wherever people move, they take their culture with them, their values, their beliefs, their attitudes, their dress, their food, indeed their music. So what are we going to do this evening? 3 things. 1, we're going to talk about how musical identity is passed from one generation to the next. We're going to talk about 3 musical traditions, norteño, corridos, and mariachi, that help form the musical identity of Mexicans and Mexican Americans along the U.S.-Mexico border, indeed wherever Mexicans live. And thirdly, let's have some fun in the process. So, how are musical traditions passed from generation to generation? Begins in the home. Remember 3 weeks ago, Professor Hardwood talked about how important music is to our ethnic, cultural, indeed national identity? Well, this process begins through the socialization that takes place in the home. Kids learn to like what their parents like, but it continues in the schools. Mariachi, for example, here in Tucson, elementary school, Davis Bilingual School, Las Aguilitas. It continues into middle school. And in the high schools, into college. Media, radio, television, internet, festivals, Tucson Me Yourself, Tucson International Mariachi Conference, norteño festivals. Speaking of norteño, where did this music begin? And what is it? Well, norteños began, it was born on the U.S.-Mexico border, in northern Mexico, in the valley, of what they call the valley in Texas, when German immigrants came, brought their accordions, and Mexicanos combined it with el bajo sexto, the 6th bass guitar. The polkas continued, but the lyrics changed. The Spanish. Now, Tex-Mex and Tejano are not the same as norteño. Tex-Mex or Tejano is an outgrowth of norteño, which in Mexico is called música norteña. But Tejano or Tex-Mex is influenced more by American musical traditions, including country western, and a lot of times it's performed in English. Whereas norteño is generally performed in Spanish and has more of a rural Mexican influence. In the next clip, we're going to listen to Max Baca play the bajo sexto and Flaco Jimenez play the accordion.
Margarita, Margarita, no me subas tan arriba, que las hojas en el árbol no duran toda la vida.
Flaco Jimenez. Flaco Jimenez. Probably the best known norteño musician in the United States. 6 Grammys. He's played with Los Lobos, he's played with Willie Nelson, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. His music has been featured in numerous movies. Y Tu Mamá También, Striptease, Tin Cup, and many more. But Margarita incidentally is not about the cocktail. It's about Marguerite. Norteño simply means northern. That's why so many of the norteño performers, particularly the groups, include the word norte or a town in northern Mexico in their name. And here are just a very few examples. Instrumentation, I mentioned the button accordion, the bajo sexto. There are 2 others that round out basically the instrumentation. Tololoche, a stand-up bass, and the snare drum. Now, the tololoche for musicians that perform on stage has been replaced with an electric bass and the snare drum with an entire drum kit. Now, okay, so I just mentioned that those are the 4 instruments. In this next clip, we're going to watch a street band from Chihuahua that includes a saxophone, a violin, and a few other instruments. So this is a polka. Listen for the polka sound, and it's called El Tololoche Chicoteado. So the focus towards the end of the clip is on the bass, stand-up bass. Norteño is dance music. You don't have to wait till the end this time. You can dance in the aisles. Even a banjo there. So who plays norteño? Mostly groups. It could be a street band, or Los Tucanes de Tijuana, a very well-known norteño band. It could be duets, Los Alegres de Terán, or others. And this other photo from my hometown that my wife took, just using the basic instruments with the snare drum. But it could be a single performer. Lydia Mendoza used to play the bajo sexto, and she had a kind of a way of just appearing at events, including Tucson Me herself, when everybody, of course, was very happy to make room in the program with her. Now, although Flaco Jimenez may be the best-known norteño musician in the United States, El Rey del Acordeón, the king of the accordion, Ramón Ayala. Ramón Ayala, 113 albums, 13 movies, numerous Grammys. He's hot. Now, in this next clip, we're just going to hear a short piece from one of his compositions, Piquito de Oro, and watch him play the accordion.
mi amor, y sabe bien que mi consentida. A ella le digo con cariño mi piquito de oro. Le gusta que la visite y le diga mi lindo tesoro.
One of his compositions. And in the next clip, we're going to see exactly how it is that the one generation passes to the other. This group, Los Bañales Juniors, age 8, 11, and 13, from Zapopan, Jalisco. The little guy, Moy, plays the totoloche and the bateria, the drums. And we're going to see a clip here where they're performing the same song that Ramon Ayala just performed. And these kids, incidentally, have about 80 videos on YouTube. They have performed on national television in Mexico, in Colombia. Incidentally, Colombians love norteño music. Last year, they celebrated the 11th National Norteño Festival. But here we're going to watch these kids play the same song, and they give credit to Ramon Ayala.
Ya les doy esta canción de Don Ramón Ayala. Esperemos que les guste.
They're in their home studio.
Yo tengo un amorcito que la quiero más que a mi vida. Por ella me muero y sabe bien que es mi consentida. A ella le digo con cariño mi piquito de oro. Le gusta que la bese y que le diga mi lindo tesoro. Ahí viene mi piquito de oro. Ahí viene a darme sus amores. Ahí viene mi piquito de oro. Ahí viene mi lindo tesoro.
Are they cute or what? They could be the next Tigres del Norte. Well, if you look close enough, this is not a bajo sexto. This is a bajo quinto. This is only 10-string guitar. But they also use this in norteño music instead of the 12. Closer to home, Las Trillizas y Dulce, the triplets, and Dulce, the triplets are 12 years old, and Dulce is 14. Ernesto Portillo Jr. wrote an article about them in the July Arizona Daily Star, and he posted this video on YouTube. But he quoted this girl as saying that playing this music is part of their Mexican identity, that it makes them feel proud of who they are, of their origin, their ancestry, their parents, they're Mexican. The longest lasting and best known norteño band in the world, Los Tigres del Norte, celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. They've sold over 30 million albums. One time they did a 12-hour concert, breaking their own record of 9 hours. This year they played in Folsom Prison, where Johnny Cash played 50 years ago. Los Tigres del Norte have been 18 films, 6 Grammys, 7 Latin Grammys. The prizes, the awards, the recognition goes on and on. They've been in Tucson numerous times. Their encores go on for an hour. It's like, encores come one song or two. These guys go on forever. Norteño musicians play polkas, they play waltzes, they play cumbias, they play rancheras, and they play corridos. Lots and lots of corridos. So what's a corrido? Corridos are ballads, basically 8-syllable, 4 or 6-line poetic stanzas that document real life events. Corridos are not dance music. Corridos are about the lyrics, the story being told. So frequently, the opening line to a corrido is, Señores, pongan cuidado. Ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ears. Listen to the story. Right? And at the end, it usually closes. There's a closing. Así termina el corrido. This is how the ballad, the corrido ends. If death has been occurred in this story, the penultimate verse usually begins, Vuela, vuela, palomita, fly, fly, little dove, a reference to the spiritual. Corridos are the voice of el pueblo, the working class. These corridos give a voice to people that generally don't have a voice in society. Jim Griffith, Big Jim Griffith, and I in a paper called the corrido the editorial page of El Pueblo, the editorial page of the people. Because they take an occurrence, an event, an issue, analyze it, provide a perspective, and that perspective is always from the perspective of El Pueblo, the masses. Corrido topics and themes. Héctor Pérez Martínez said that basically anything que conmueve el sentimiento del pueblo, anything that moves, that touches us, will end up in corrido. Merrill Simmons put it even more simply. Any happening of general public interest calls for a corrido. Any event. Well, we have here two CDs. One's about basically a lot of horses, horse races. The other one about the Mexican Revolution. There are a lot of corridos about the Mexican Revolution, but also about World War II, Iraq, almost every war. You recall when the United States invaded Iraq, there were about 500 embedded journalists. Pancho Villa had embedded corridista, a composer of corridos. That's why a lot of corridos about Pancho Villa are favorable. Now, I mentioned that 8 syllable, and musicians talk about 8 count. So this is these are real lines at the beginning of corridos. This is the corrido that I'm going to sing for you, for example, and this is what it looks like. When I compose, I'm not a musician. And so I don't talk about count, I'm talking about syllables. But it's poetic. There's a rhyming scheme with the end of the second and fourth, and if there's 6 lines, the 6th line as well. Well, here's a couple we could do very quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 there. Okay? Basically, that's the situation. Topics, again, everything and anything. Tucson Zone Lalo Guerrero composed a corrido about Cesar Chavez in recognition of a 25-day fast in 1968. But he also composed another one about Robert Kennedy when he was assassinated. Other topics, Sputnik, 9/11, you name it, they're out there. And if, give me a topic, I'll find you one. And if I can't find you one, I'll compose one for you. In early 1980s, the Los Angeles Dodgers, yay, Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers recruited a pitcher from Sonora, Fernando Valenzuela. Fernando Valenzuela was the only baseball player to win both Rookie of the Year, a Cy Young Award in the same season. A lot of corridos about him. El Zurdo de Oro, the golden left-hander, for example. Another one's El Toro, because his nickname was the Bull. Michael Jackson, when he passed away, an international star, people took note. Corridistas did too. A lot of corridos. Assassinations. Colosio, Selena, When President Kennedy was assassinated, overnight, 16 corridos were composed. It's a little booklet called the Kennedy Corridos. When President Obama was running for office, that was international news. Imagine a black president of the United States. Noteworthy. Yes, of course. There are at least 5 corridos about President Obama. Another 5, at least, about Mexico's president-elect, AMLO. For the last 20 or so years, during the last 20 or so years, close to 1,000 women have been murdered in Ciudad Juarez. In 1 year alone, 2011, 300 women were murdered. You can be certain that there are corridos about this. And here to sing a few stanzas from one of his corridos, my longtime friend and collaborator, Guillermo Sainz, originally from Chihuahua, U of A graduate, composer, singer. We've collaborated on numerous projects, and he's going to sing 4 stanzas from Cruces Rojas, Pink Crosses.
Buenas noches. De hace muchos años hasta el hoy presente, algo en Ciudad Juárez está sucediendo. Se siente vergüenza que nada ni nadie pueden contener este feminicidio. Son muy jovencitas las mujeres muertas, humildes y solas, recién inmigradas, empleadas de casas y de maquiladoras, también prostitutas malafortunadas.
Gracias, Guillermo. Gracias. The border has been a source of inspiration for corridistas for 100 years at least. And when we think border corridos, think heroic stands against discrimination, prejudice, where Mexicanos are frequently the subject of tragedy. We have here a collection from border corridos from the 20s and 30s. And a couple of things here. One, there's a corrido about la inundación de Nogales, a flood in Nogales, for example. And you'll notice that many of these have, say, part 1 and part 2. Corridos, prior to commercial radio, were long because stories are generally longer than 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes. So when they first started recording corridos, they didn't fit on one side of a 78 or a 45. So you had half on one side, had to flip it over to listen to the rest of the corrido. One of the best known border corridos, el corrido de Gregorio Cortés. Now I'm not going to tell you the whole story here tonight. I'm going to refer you to the movie, The Ballad of Gregorio Cortés, and the book With His Pistol in His Hand by Américo Paredes. Américo Paredes wrote an entire book on this corrido, but also developed the theory of Greater Mexico to help us understand how it is that Mexican culture is diffused and goes far beyond the political boundary that separates the United States and Mexico. Another very well-known corrido about that sort of takes place along the border, called El Corrido de Cananea, better known as La Cárcel de Cananea, the jail of Cananea. Now the story here is that a man goes to Agua Prieta, across the border from Douglas, and is apprehended and taken to the jail in Cananea. Now, if you go to Cananea today, the building's still there. It's not a jail. It's a museum. And as you enter, when Jim Griffith and I went on a research trip one time and went there, and the words to this corrido are engraved on a plaque inside the museum. And let's listen to a couple verses here by Tucson's own Linda Ronstadt.
La cárcel de Cananea está situada en una mesa. La cárcel de Cananea está situada en una mesa. Y en ella fui procesado por causa de mi torpeza. Y en ella fui procesado por causa de mi torpeza.
In one of the variants of this corrido, there's a great line. The protagonist is brought before the judge, and the judge asks him, "Do you know why you're here?" And he responds, "I doubt it's because you're going to build me a crystal palace." That probably didn't help his case. But during the last 20 years, there's a series of corridos that are called narco corridos that talk about drug trafficking, drug lords, shootouts with federales and police. Unfortunately, seems to be the only way that young men in particular have come to know the corrido tradition. I've written about narco corridos. I don't particularly like them, not so much because of the subject, but because 95% of them are not any good. The quality is horrible. And many of them were commissioned. People paid to, write me a corrido about me. Of course I'm going to write you something that's favorable, right? You're paying. In early 1990s, when I was a vice president, Dr. Macario Saldate, then director of Mexican-American Studies Research Center, and I went to La Universidad de Sinaloa in Culiacán, University of Sinaloa, and we met with the president. We were going to sign an agreement between the two universities. And along the way, because of my interest in corridos, I said to David Moreno, the president, I'd like to see the chapel Jesus Malverde. They put chapel in quotes. I'll explain in a minute. And he said, sure, I'll take you. But it'll probably be about midnight. And we'll have dinner at 10. And like, why midnight? Like, you'll see. Well, we had dinner about 10. About midnight, we drive over there. And when we went inside, this is what we saw. Musicians. And all these plaques. And a little altar to Malverde. This is Jesus Malverde. Now, incidentally, a week ago when Professor Magaña talked about hip-hop, there's a hip-hop artist in California that goes by Jesus Malverde. But who is this guy? He's not a real saint. Well, he was born in 1885 and died in 1909. And he had a Robin Hood kind of image. Stole from the rich and gave to the poor. How he went from that to the narco saint, I don't know. But, he's not a saint, but here's the Virgen de Guadalupe on this plaque. And, okay, so midnight comes and we go in there, and musicians playing, and what did we see? Well, dark SUV pulls up, a couple guys go in there, do their little prayer to Malverde to keep them safe on their journey to move drugs to the U.S. And the narco saint. This chapel, incidentally, has gotten larger, and his fame has spread even more, to the point where almost in any mercado in Latin America, today you can buy that little bust of Jesus Malverde. Migration corridos. Also an inspiration for corridistas for over 100 years. In fact, this is the topic that got me interested in corridos. Started collecting them. Began with one that my father liked, Vendiste los Bueyes. Then doing research on them and writing about them and eventually composing them. The first two here, El Lavaplatos and Superman es Ilegal, are humorous. First one talks about a man who came to the U.S. in the late 1920s, went to California, to Hollywood, because he wanted to be a movie star. The only work he could find is as a laborer and eventually only as a dishwasher. Highly disillusioned, he returned to Mexico to live forever. Superman es ilegal. Superman is illegal. In this, it's humorous, but rather point. The story is basically that Superman and the protagonist, the Mexican protagonist, are both undocumented immigrants to the United States. But Superman is tall, light-skinned, good-looking, and he's welcomed with open arms, whereas the Mexicano, short, darker skin, well, you get the picture. In 2008, a 5-CD was released, corrido CD was released to radio stations in central Mexico and along the U.S.-Mexico border. Shortly after it was released, it was discovered that the Border Patrol was behind this CD. They had commissioned the recording of these corridos and the distribution. Supposedly, it was about deterrence, because in every corrido, the migrants, the immigrants, ended up dead. So that deterrence worked? Yeah, really. Okay, maybe not. The last one here that I have, Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, is my latest composition. 6 years ago, and this is in the news this week. 6 years ago, a Border Patrol agent shot through the fence at Nogales, killed a 16-year-old boy. Shot 16 times. Ran out of bullets, in fact, at one point, and reloaded and moved to another spot and shot. The kid was already dead. Hit him twice in the head, 8 in the back. He was tried once, acquitted. He's being tried this week. Trials again. So here, to sing 3 verses from my corrido, Jose Elena Rodriguez, is Guillermo.
Sonaron varios balazos con intención de matar. Así comienza el corrido que aquí les voy a cantar. José quedó ahí tirado en el suelo agonizando. Loni recargó su arma para seguirle apuntando. Despedida no les doy, solo nos queda la pena que la migra asesinó al joven Antonio Elena.
I mentioned, if I didn't, that Guillermo interprets corridos very well because in that tradition, one voice, one guitar. If you have to hear the lyrics, you want to be able to hear them, and the singer's got to be able to enunciate. Now, I mentioned that Guillermo and I have longtime collaborators. I don't sing. I write the lyrics. He puts the music to them. Okay, once in a while I sing. That's me on the left. But it's at the end of the night with my cousins. Okay, maybe some liquor was involved. I don't know. This is the real saint. And this is the patron saint of migrants. He was canonized by JP. No, not this JP. No, Pope John Paul II in 2000. No one knew this individual until beginning in the 1970s, but particularly in the 1990s, when migrants started reporting that when they were in distress, about to cross the border, having crossed the border, run out of water, that a man appeared dressed in black and led them across, gave them food, and disappeared. Eventually, everyone described him, and it was this priest. Father Toribio Romo was born in 1900 in Santana, Jalisco, and was killed by the Federales in 1928. Mexico's attempt to eliminate Catholicism in Mexico, the Cristero movement. A lot of corridos about San Toribio Romo. The chapel here in Santana, Jalisco, prior to the 90s, was visited by 50 people a week, maybe. Today, 5,000 people a week go there. How is it that corridos get passed from one generation to the next? Well, JP mentioned that we ran a corridos contest at Tucson Me Yourself for many years, for example. The U of A Poetry Center had a contest now run by the Mexican American Studies Department, a contest for high school students. We received hundreds of entries. One year, Linda Ronstadt and I served as judges. There was also a CD issued for the 10th anniversary and a little booklet that went with that CD. I have an article in there. Dr. Maribel Alvarez have an article in there. One story inspires 100. Jose Alfredo Jimenez composed a corrido, one of the best-known corridos out there, El Corrido del Caballo Blanco, Ballad of the White Horse. I wrote a paper on this corrido because it traces the migrant route from central Mexico into California. It's been occurring for, 70 years at least. Lalo Guerrero wrote a parody of that corrido, called El Burro Norteño, whereas the White Horse begins in Guadalajara and basically ends in Tijuana. El Burro Norteño begins in Tijuana and ends up in Guadalajara. There's also a corrido about the White Lowrider. But Jose Alfredo Jimenez is best known for La Canción Ranchera, Mexico's country song. He composed 300 or so of them. Most of them are classic. It's a staple of all mariachis. There's not a mariachi in the world that does not play Jose Alfredo Jimenez songs. So what is mariachi? Let's begin with the word. Incidentally, it's not Mary. Just at noon, I heard some mariachi. Sorry. Say ma. Say ma with me. Ma. All right, mariachi, like Maria. Okay. And the word itself is a lot. This is a mariachi. Okay. The word itself has there's a lot of confusion out there and erroneous notions about where it originated. The most common is that it originated with the French occupation of Mexico, and the word for marriage, the French word for marriage, mariage, because a lot of the French use string bands at their events. I'll let you know why that is not correct in a second. The word itself comes from the Coca language of the indigenous Coca people. Initially referred to a tree, then later to the platform where dancers dance, then later to any musical group that played for those dancers, and eventually to what we know today as mariachi. This is the region where it originated. Now, the people in Jalisco, and particularly Guadalajara or Cocula, say that this is the cuna del mariachi, the birthplace of the mariachi. Mariachi was not born in Guadalajara or Cocula. It is of a region that includes Nayarit, Colima, Jalisco, and Michoacán. Well, the border is very important, and we'll come back to that, how we get. So how is it that we know that it didn't come from French occupation? Well, in 1852, about 9 years before the French arrived in Mexico, Father Cosme Santana wrote his bishop. And he said, "Bishop, guess what? I took away the instruments of these musicians that play after Mass every Sunday, and around here they called them mariachis." Mariachis. Now, there's other references now that have been discovered prior to the French. Sometimes the end is with an E instead of an I, but it refers to the same word. So what is this tradition? It's a culture, basically, that includes instrumentation, it includes attire, it includes serenading and playing at restaurants and bars, and dancers. Because mariachis, the foundation of the musical traditions in mariachi are the son, and it's a son jalicense because there's also a son jarocho from Veracruz area, but these are dance tunes, the son, and la canción ranchera, country's ranch or country music, Mexico's country music. Now, in a paper that we were writing on La Bamba, we were doing research in Mexico City and discovered that the singing style of la canción ranchera originates with Italian opera. And the story goes like this. Incidentally, William Gradante and I think were the first ones to write about this in an article that he and I co-authored. And the story is that the Spanish used to bring entertainment from Europe to El Coliseo de Mexico, a theater in Mexico City, and including Italian opera. But the people that worked in the place, cleaning and so on, were pretty much from the countryside, poor people. And they just started mimicking, making fun of this singing style, el bel canto, right? The beautiful singing of the Italian. And, well, that's the kind of foundation for the style of singing. The photo on your left is how mariachis used to dress. Calzón blanco. When I was a kid growing up in Michoacán, there were still laborers, field workers that dressed this way. White linen clothes, huaraches. And musicians that at night would go out cascareando, to play for tips in their work clothes. So how is it that we go from that to something along these lines? Incidentally, these are called botonaduras because they were buttons. They used to open up. In this mariachi here in the middle, you see, well, it's hard to see, but it's opened here, right? And this one has opened in the middle and buttoned on the bottom. So we go from that. Here's the instruments. Now, stage mariachis also use a harp. Traditional mariachis used to use trombones, drums, flutes, you name it. So how is it that we got to these 5 instruments? Incidentally, the trumpet, there's a whole story about the trumpet. We can talk about that some other time. It's a later addition. Violin, the instrument in the middle, el guitarrón. It literally translates into large guitar. Rounded back. There's a saying in Mexico, si no llega el guitarrón, no hay mariachi. Because this is the base instrument of mariachi. If the guitarrón player doesn't show, there's no mariachi. The other instrument here is a small, it's called vihuela, small, high-pitched guitar. We'll hear some of these sounds in a minute. and a larger than average guitar called guitarra de golpe, because they used to hit on it like a drum. Okay? So this is a young mariachi from Chicago called Herencia de Mexico. We're going to listen to a few of these instruments. The tune is called El Cascabel, and it features the instruments, beginning with a vihuela. So you get the transformation because, from Canción Banco to the next sort of version, Mariachi Cirilo Marmolejo. He took his mariachi permanently to Mexico City in 1920, almost always playing in a restaurant called El Tenampa, right on Plaza Garibaldi, the Plaza de los Mariachis. And this guy in the middle is not it's Dr. Rodriguez. He's a doctor. He was not a musician, but he dressed like a mariachi or a charro. Right? The charro outfit is what now mariachis wear. So we went to this. This is what today's mariachis look like. The buttons are not buttons. They're decorations. And they can be metal or they can be embroidery. Tight pants, no back pockets. The stand for a mariachi is tall and at this angle of feet. Because if you stay, mariachis always play standing up. So if you stand a long time, it's like this is really hard at attention, right? But at the relaxed pose. And they stand tall. That's the tradition. In Mexico, the tradition is if you can only afford one suit, it should be black. Because if the guitarrón player doesn't show, you can call a buddy from another mariachi, and if he's wearing black, it's in. The standardization of instruments and the attire really occurred during what is called the golden age of Mexican cinema, 20s, 30s, and 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it started with this movie, Allá en el Rancho Grande. During that period, 30s, 40s, and 50s, over 200 movies were made that included mariachis. By the end of that period, the instruments were standardized, the attire was standardized, and so mariachis look like they do today, but that's not what they always look like. This photograph is a photograph of my maternal grandparents. Now, it was in black and white. It was taken in 1921. But about 50 years ago, I sat with my grandmother, and I said, "Do you remember the colors?" She says, "Of course I remember the colors. That's our wedding photograph." My grandfather was not a musician, never played an instrument, never sang, not even around the house. But look at his dress, his attire for his wedding. Tight pants, short jacket, white shirt, and a bow that hangs. Now, the bows have been tied now, but this is what people see. When there was a mariachi in 1905 that was invited to Mexico City to play at President Diaz's birthday party. Now, if you and I get invited to the White House, we're probably not going to dress in our daily clothes, street clothes. Probably going to try to dress up a little bit. So the mariachis started going to Mexico City, looked around, it's like, how do people dress for special men, dress for special occasions, or for Sunday Mass? Well, the charros of that region, the men of that region, dress basically like this. So they started to try to dress the mariachis up to go to Los Pinos or Mexico City or outside of the region. I said that traditionally the attire is black. Now it's every color in the rainbow is used. Literally, every single quote. Los Camperos de Naticano. Nati passed away a few years ago. A lot of different colors. Sol de Mexico, also one of the best mariachis. Green, red, black, you name it. They've got all the colors. They also are very versatile. They play both traditional sones, rancheras, and they play American swing and even Beach Boys song. Is this a mariachi? Well, it's a stand-up bass, doubles as a guitarrón. The woman is playing a vihuela, and the man is sitting in a wheelchair because you can't see it, but he's got a cast right here, and he's got a broken ankle. My wife took that photo in Zapopan. Well, it's probably not a mariachi you'd contract for an event, but in the region it's called mariachillo. Yeah, a rinky-dink mariachi, but a mariachi nonetheless. The Catholic Church has had a very interesting relationship with mariachis, from disdain to inclusion. They didn't like mariachis because mariachis were associated with bars and restaurants and serenades and a little bit of tequila and that kind of thing. In the mid-1960s, Catholics were dropping out of the church. And there was a priest named Jean-Marc Leclerc, a French priest assigned to a parish in Cuernavaca, outside of Mexico City. And he noticed that the people really enjoyed mariachi. And he said to the bishop, what if we bring the mariachi in the church? You think that people would follow, especially men? Now, the bishop was kind of a radical bishop, Sergio Méndez Arceo. And he said, what a great idea. He was already in trouble with the hierarchy. Yeah, let's bring the mariachi in. So this priest wrote La Misa Panamericana. And I have a copy of the original album. And it's what we know today as the Mariachi Mass. My wife also took this photograph. In a very, very small town named El Barrio, there was no one in the church when we went in. And we afterwards got talking to the musicians and said, why is this a special occasion? Why are you playing here in church? No, we're just going to go to the next larger town, Cotija, and we always play to the Virgen first, so that when we go cascareando, playing for tips, that we'll do well. Tucson was an early adopter of mariachi mass and mariachis. Father Charles Rourke started Los Changuitos Feos. Los Changuitos. Los Changuitos are still around, and many, many generations of musicians have grown up through Los Changuitos Feos, including Tucson's Mariachi Cobre, that since 1982 have been at Epcot Center, Disney World in Florida. Well, also one of the best mariachis in the world. You may recall that last month they were here auditioning in Tucson for 3 new members, have some retiring. I mentioned mariachi and dance go together, particularly the sones. This is a photograph from the Tucson International Mariachi Conference. The priest is on the stage, the mariachi in the background, and the dancers there. Women and mariachi. Women are not strangers to mariachi. In the late 40s, early 50s, there were 3 all-female mariachis, but they didn't dress like men. That is, they didn't dress in the traditional attire that we know today. They dressed in short dresses, high heels, no hats, all kinds of difference, right? But they were not also strangers in terms of singers. A lot of singers were mariachi singers. If there's one contribution that the United States has made to the mariachi tradition, is the role of women. Women in the United States are involved in this tradition in an incredible way. and exceptional musicians. The University of Arizona used to have a summer program in Guadalajara. And for the welcoming of students, we always had a mariachi there. One of my students, a female student, was a violinist. And she talked to me and says, "You think that they might let me play with them?" And so I talked to the guys, and they were hesitant. Oh, like, what does she know about mariachi music? Eventually, one of them loaned her his violin. She got up there, played 2 tunes. By the end of the afternoon, they offered her a job. She didn't take it. Probably the best known female mariachi in the United States, Las Divas. Next year they'll celebrate their 20th anniversary. They're the official mariachi for Disneyland. The first mariachi to be nominated for and win a Grammy. They've won 2 now. The director of this mariachi, Cindy Shea, was a jazz musician, a trumpeter. And she's of Italian and Irish background. And he got into mariachi, big way. This is a very good mariachi. I think the women have been very innovative. There's a mariachi in New York, Mariachi Flor de Toloache. We're going to listen to a clip. Now, they never dress in the traditional style. I mean, they have sort of image of buttons down the side, but they dress in spandex pants. Their bows never tied around their neck. They have bows in their hair. They wear high heels, but they play really good traditional music. In fact, Andrea Gallegos brought them to Tucson one time. We're going to listen to a song here, a dance tune, a very well-known one, Guadalajara. That's this kind of dance.
Colomitos lejanos, ojitos y aguermonos. Ay, colomitos inolvidables como las tardes en que la lluvia desde la loma irnos así hasta Zapopan.
Hey, mariachi. They're very good. Madison Square Garden. They played Madison Square Garden. I mentioned earlier that the style of singing of La Canción Ranchera originates with this bel canto, the beautiful singing of the Italian opera. Bring it kind of full circle. Placido Domingo, one of the great tenors, has recorded 2 CDs with mariachi. And we're going to listen to a clip where he's performing with a symphony and mariachi, Gama Mil, and a female singer in Mexico, Lucero.
Este amor apasionado anda todo alborotado por volver. Voy camino a la locura y aunque todo me tortura, sé querer.
Nos cercamos hace tiempo, pero me llegó el momento de perder. Tú tenías mucha razón, le hago caso al corazón y con Plácido he de volver.
Okay, if you know it, you volver.
perder, no sé perder, quiero volver, volver, volver.
This music, passion. All right. So this song, Volver, Volver, like Mexico's national anthem. But it launched Vicente Fernandez's 50-year career. And here in the next clip, he's singing with his son Alejandro. And a couple years ago, Vicente did his farewell tour. He hasn't performed, gone on tour after that, and singing one of José Alfredo Jiménez's songs.
Yo no sé lo que valga mi vida, pero yo te la vengo a entregar. Yo no sé si tu amor la reciba, pero yo te la vengo a dejar.
He is the rey de la canción ranchera, Vicente Fernández, no relationship. Everybody, like, there's Pedro Fernández, Vicente Fernández, Alejandro Fernández, like, everybody thinks I'm related, we're not. But you saw Vicente always performs with his gun, just like my grandfather when he got married. So how's the mariachi tradition passed down? Well, here in Tucson, through the Tucson International Mariachi Conference. Next year, the conference, yes, absolutely. Next year, the conference will be celebrating its 37th anniversary. Thousands of students have studied mariachi through this conference, from this region, from throughout the states, from out of the country, from Mexico. Here we see a room full of students learning from the masters, Mariachi Vargas, Cobre, Los Camperos, Sol, Tecalitlán, Nuevo Tecalitlán. All the best mariachis have come to teach. There's room full of trumpets, there's room full of vihuelas, guitarrones, and so on. Tucson International Mariachi Conference, a fundraiser for La Frontera, Arizona, behavioral health organization. Mariachis are hot. Throughout the world, we find mariachis now. With the exception of the current occupant of the White House, every president has had mariachis. President Reagan danced with them. President Clinton honored them with a medal, Los Camperos. President Bush had a great laugh with them. And President Obama was serenaded by them. But I think President Reagan preferred norteño. We started the evening with Juan Gabriel, and we're going to end the evening with Juan Gabriel. The night he died, there was a spontaneous concert in Plaza Garibaldi around his statue. All night long, all these mariachis came to honor Juan Gabriel. The song that we're listening to in the background, Amor Eterno, Eternal Love, he composed in 1974 when his mother died. It is a classic. Everybody knows it, everybody performs, particularly at funerals.
Estar dormido que despierto de tanto y tanto que me duele que no estés. Como quisiera que tú vivieras, que tus ojitos jamás se hubieran cerrado nunca y estar voy a estar contigo para seguir amándote.
rest in peace. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Stay here.
Yeah.
Don't leave.
Thank you, Sel, for a great talk. And now we're pleased to introduce the Tucson's own Mariachi Sonido de Mexico.